Okay, here we go. Okay, we are live.
Okay, technically we are now live, which means that the announcement is going out to about 15,000 people that we're live. So people will start logging in now and they'll be able to hear and see us.
Okay.
But the program won't officially begin until the top of the hour.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
it's Sunday morning there for you.
Yes, yes.
What time is it?
So it is about, I guess, 10 to 11.
10 to 11. Okay.
So we would be 8 hours different mountain time
Yeah.
and 7 hours California. And then it goes a little bit more as you go east in the States, then add an hour to that. There we go. Yeah. Yes. And we're a day ahead. Like
Yeah,
here it's Sunday.
right. But it's more than 8 hours. You're like 15 or 16 hours.
Oh, yes. So the way I calculated it is that whenever I know it's 7 hours difference because I count backwards.
Right. Seven hours difference plus 24.
Right? Yeah, right.
Subtract seven, add 24.
Mm.
Okay, the countdown clock is running. Good work, Emmy.
Thank you. Well, thanks to Anderson Chadwick for giving us a new one. It was 15 minutes, so I had to play down the first 5 minutes and then started us at 10. And it looks like it's not showing the file, so the file location at the top like it has been. So it looks like it is an improvement. Thank you, Anderson Chadwick.
Mhm.
Oh, Jeff, you're muted again.
Who is also in Australia.
Oh,
Okay.
The man, on one occasion, he's a regular viewer, and I designed one of these animated rainbow yin yangs like this. And I did it 20 years ago, and I made an offhand remark saying it could be updated. We could make a better one. And he heard me say that, and he went and took it upon himself to make this one, which is very superior to the old one that I did long ago.
Mm.
So we use it.
I'm just noticing that the circles in the yin and the yang are actually cylindrical cones, like they look like domes, a bit of a
Yeah.
in terms of how they're showing up. You see
Yeah,
the
it has
point?
a three-dimensional quality. You're right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
And as it circles, then you can see the. It seems as though the pyramid is twisting.
It's
mm-hmm.
That's
it's
great.
following the color pattern on each side. So that
Yeah.
it goes, each half of the yin yang goes through the whole rainbow. And the
Mm,
idea ideally is that along the S curve in the center, the colors are always complementary to each
mm,
other. It's
mm,
probably not
mm.
quite perfect, but it's pretty close.
Yeah, yeah. And then you get the different reflections on each side of the colors on the opposite side.
Yeah, it's my copyrighted design.
It's beautiful. Mhm. Mm.
I only wish I had brought my own pair of sunglasses today.
Oh, we could all put on sunglasses.
I'll have to run upstairs. Maybe I should run up. Jeff, do you have some nearby? I could run upstairs and get a pair.
Oh, sure, I do.
Okay, I'm
I
gonna go
do.
get a pair and see if I'll see if I can find some.
That's great.
All right. Let's see what I got.
That's very sweet.
Okay. So we'll be like the Blues Brothers.
I mean,
All right, I'm ready to
we've been
roll.
blinded by the light.
But I'll have to take these off so I can read the comment.
Yeah, we could put them on periodically.
Yeah, yeah.
I will say it helps the ring light quite a bit.
Oh,
Yes, well, that I've got the lots of tangles and knots and blurry spots, and so my field of vision is not clear at all.
Oh,
Um, and so it's disorienting, but it can be fixed.
oh,
yeah.
good.
So I'm in a time of seeing whether or not the brain adapts to it, which I've been in quite for a long time now. But these are prescription for my eyes, and then it has this shade that was recommended. So
Oh.
yeah.
Well, they
You
look
know,
really cute on
Janelle had surgery on her eyes and they implanted trifocal lenses.
you. Wow.
Wow. Yep. Was that from cataracts or just to get the proper lens prescription so that she
Uh,
didn't have to?
there may have been cataracts as well, but it enables her. She can see at three different distances. I think they switch pretty much automatically. I don't know how that's
Mm,
done, but she's very happy with it. And,
good. That's
and it
great.
was mostly covered by Medicare.
Mm, mm. And so did it take her time to adapt?
Well, we'd have to ask her. I don't, and even today, there are some things that are different. Like if she looks at the sky or the moon, for example, she'll see um, what would you call it? Lines coming off of them.
Oh, yes. Okay. Yes, yes, yes. Mm, mm.
But yeah, I think she adapted very quickly.
Right.
She's been encouraging me to get that surgery, and I have no desire to let any doctor operate on my eyes.
Well, speaking of surgery, however, your hips have come good, and
My knees.
I mean, your knees. Yes, yes.
Well, they've done the first one in April, and it went very well, Julie. And then the next surgery is going to be on Tuesday.
Okay. Wow. Yes. Ah,
Positive
lovely.
vibes to you, Jeffrey Mishlove. All who
Thank
are
you.
catching this, for everything to go
Mm,
smoothly and
mm,
minimal to no pain or no pain at all.
mm, mm.
The first
Yeah.
one, very smooth. I was surprised, as a matter of fact, at how smoothly it went. And my anticipation is that the second operation will be even easier because I know exactly what to expect, and I know some of the things to avoid doing that I didn't avoid doing before.
Yeah.
Like
Ah,
icing that knee regularly.
Yeah, yeah. So I felt so good. Like just the day or two after the surgery, I didn't think I had to be as uh, diligent as they told me I needed to be about putting ice on my knee at least every hour. And then after a week of not icing my knee, I realized that I had made a mistake.
and then you went into icing overdrive.
Well, at least to keep up with the proper schedule, and
Yeah.
it turned out fine.
Yeah. Good. Good. Great. Happy to hear that.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to begin soon. Oh, all right. I'll put on my
Should we
sunglasses.
put them on in solidarity with Julie
Yeah.
as we begin? I think
That'd
that's a
be
great
cute.
idea. It's sort of like being at it's kind of like well, it's night here in the US. It's sort of like being at like a 3D movie theater.
Or we're like the Blues Brothers.
Oh yeah, there we go. I like that. I'm a soul woman. Isn't that the Blues Brothers?
Yeah, we can do our. For such a serious subject, we can. You
That's
know.
right. Well, if I could conduct all my interviews this way, I wouldn't be so light sensitive.
Are you light sensitive too? Your
Well, I
eyes?
think just from doing so many interviews with the lights, but no, I'm okay. I'm okay.
Yeah. There you go.
Welcome, everybody. We're live. I'm Jeffrey Mishlove. I'm with my co-host, Emmy Vadnais, and our special live stream guest, Julie Anderson. Our topic today is the role of the guru, and the sunglasses are for support. Julie, I'll just say right at the outset, in case people are curious, that you have an eye condition that so the sunglasses are helpful to you. And Emmy and I thought, out of support, we would put ours on as well. But Emmy and I are going to be reading the questions that come in from our viewers in the chat, and so we will
probably not keep them on the whole time, but we.
No, I'm going to need to.
I just wanted to look as cool as Julie looked. That's why I got my. I don't think I can look as cool as Julie, but I can try.
Yes, you too. So we can be in unison, but we won't put too much attention. We'll just let it flow.
Occasionally, yes, we might put them on.
So for those viewers who may not know, Julie has been a guest on the New Thinking Aloud channel at least 4 times. I think this is your 5th today. She has been a devotee of a guru, Adida Samraj. She is also very critical of the organization that the guru left behind. She is very concerned about cults, and will be willing to take all kinds of questions about cults, about gurus, about the role of the guru, the proper role of the guru, and the improper role of the guru. And so, Julie, would you like to make an opening statement?
Thank you. Firstly, thank you for this opportunity. And I feel that I'm here to be speaking for all those who have a relationship to a guru, who have, those who may, those who are familiar with the paradigm of the guru-devotee relationship, and how it has manifested in different traditions and cultures throughout time. And I'm grateful to have the opportunity to be able to speak about it because of my own life and relationship to Adida. And also participating with him and his relationship to the guru tradition, which he spent a huge amount of time combining with and communicating about. And also was very, very, very much taught me a lot, involved in teaching me a lot and transmitting a lot about the process of true guru yoga and that practice and what gurus do and what is okay and what's not okay, both through his demonstration and revelation and instruction. So I'm grateful to be able to pass that on, from him, and also speak humbly, very humbly speak, because I'm not a guru. I don't have that function. And as we know, there are many different kinds of gurus also. There's not just one form of guru. There are teachers, and what a guru is a being who is adept at a process or a yoga or a form of instruction relative to human life, religious life, or spiritual life, or transcendental life. And some of them have the capability of being able to be very clear in their instruction and help people to apply those instructions. Some people also, in addition to instructions, they're able to help heal or guide them in different ways through combining with the spirit force or healing forces. And others also then have the capability to be able to transmit awakened states that are considered to be prior to mind and beyond, inclusive of the spirit, and also the transcendental aspect. And this has been studied endlessly. This is a huge focus for a lot of beings throughout time. As an intellectual, as a philosopher, as students, as seekers, as people from all the different traditions, this is a really big, important subject and function to address and to be able to consider. And it should never end, and it should always be examined. And it shouldn't just be taken based upon gossip or lack of education or lack of participation or coming at it from an angle of merely just fear or reactivity, or even just coming from a naive participation in it without really understanding the real process involved. And all of what I'm saying here is based upon my own direct experience of it. And so I will speak mainly from my own experience, but also from the knowledge that I've been given. But also I'm speaking to everybody in the room here as we're gathered. And what I really want to point out to all of us is that in the room where you are and where we are together, there is an I, and there is a you, and there is a we, and there is the divine light, there is consciousness, there is being, all of the different words that have been applied, in the process of our lives with one another to relate and to make sense of our situation together. In this particular dialogue and consideration about the function of the guru, the way I have come to understand it is that the guru is the light and the life and the being that is the very source and context of every single one of us. We would not be living and breathing and be conscious without that source condition of consciousness and being and light itself, because everything is conscious being, conscious light. And the quality of that, when you invest yourself in the relationship to the guru as being that, the nature and the quality of that is love. It's actually love bliss. Conscious being is love bliss. And that's the nature of devotion, that is about the yielding into, consciously participating, responsibly choosing to enter into a relationship of one who has the skills and is adept at being able to instruct and transmit to your heart. And then that will also then affect the whole bodily being. And it could be a tree, it could be an animal, it could be a space, it can be an apparent being, it can be a higher being. I mean, there are all sorts of manners within which the guru function manifests. So with all of us in this space, we all have different bodily beings and experience and history. And so the way that the guru comes into our field in particularities that seem different have to do with what our needs are in the process of growth. But even prior to the uniqueness of each one of us, wherein there is the unknowable absolute and the formless being of whatever you might want to call it, God, truth, reality, nirvana, moksha, all the different traditions have a way of naming what it is that we want to feel, which is free, happy, loving, without conflict, to be able to do happy and loving and creative things together rather than destroying the world. So this is the right and true function of a guru. So I speak to the heart in all of us in that recognition, in the recognition of that heart yearning and the source that lives and breathes us all.
Thank you, Julie. We have a question here from Celia Funk, who is one of our volunteers, who asks, can you tell us in concrete terms what were the various scandals linked to Adida?
Okay, so throughout Adida's life, particularly from the time that he began to become a serious seeker himself, which is around in the 60s at some point in time, he himself went to gurus and to teachers and involved himself with various forms of learning in that was part of the process of him being able to assume the function of guru. And within each one of those contexts of learning, like in Scientology or with the Lutheran Church, and then with Rudy, and then with Baba Muktananda, and then with the associations with that lineage, and then his association in more subtle forms, there were always different controversies that would come into being relative to him being so fully given over in his passion for the truth of it in terms of whatever he came in relationship to. He was always very passionate and honest about his assessment of what was going on. And he always continued to operate with that kind of unabashed integrity and honesty about the process of human religious and spiritual growth and awakening. So whoever he came into relationship with, he was very open, very passionate, directly relating to everyone that he came into connection with. And then he also did that with people who came to him when he began his function in the late 60s and early 70s. And at that point in time, the scandals began because he realized that his honesty, his unabashed participation in being and doing whatever it was that was necessary in relationship to whoever who was with him, whether it would be not following the norms of what was acceptable within the tradition of any individual, or if a person was had a certain notion about how things should be relative to social behavior or relative to diet or relative to any aspect of life, sexuality in particular, working with people directly in the arenas of life that really there's a conventional norm that's acceptable. And if you step outside of that, that's when controversies begin to manifest. People will look at the manner in which you function, and that will cause a reaction. That reaction isn't really bad, it's just to be expected. So, for example, in the early times when Adida taught, it would be expected that he had a certain costume because he was a guru. And so the notion of a Westerner is that a guru is dressed in a certain way and appears a certain way. Or if the Christians came to him, they would have a notion of him as the pastor or as the priest or whatever. So all the notions that people had about how he should behave, he confronted in the sense that he'd wear a different costume, or he'd be a different way, or he wouldn't appear a certain way. He would be sexually active rather than being a celibate. He wouldn't just be sexually active with one person or a wife. He would actually be sexually active with a few. or he would teach people in a manner that would confront them relative to their certain expectations. Those were really the sources of the conflicts. And when these conflicts then became too much for the participant that he was relating to continue with him in the process, then there would be a reverberation of a reaction that would take hold on out into the world. So I would say that I'm not dismissing the fact that there were certain controversies or troubles that occurred around him that are just entirely to be dismissed. I have no point of view about that whatsoever, but the difficulties that came about, I would say that were mainly the cause was around what he indicates as money, food, and sex. The three primary obsessions that most people have. And specifically, for example, me. I think I've spoken to this before, but I came from a very ordinary life in Southern California, and I left the university, UCLA, where I was on a scholarship, and just walked away from it because of my response to Adi Da. My seeking impulse became so strong. And the young man that I was with when I, went there, he was wholly into this process of making the choice. We made this choice. But a few years later, he felt that, he had seen the smoking and the drinking and the guru functioning in the manner of being the authority, and devotees enacting these devotional processes with him, and in terms of bowing down, offering gifts, and listening to the guru, doing what the guru says, participating in ways that were not familiar to most common norms. And he had felt that there were things that he was seeing that he couldn't combine with anymore. And that became a scandal. And so it went out on the news, and I was in the news, my family was in the news, he was in the news, and that particular event in 1985 still reverberates to this day in terms of different of the claims of what happened that were so terrible. And I want to say that I have spoken to this now an older man that I came to Adi Da with, within the last year or so, and he said that he regretted what had happened with, how that came into the world, because the media got a hold of it and they made something out of it that he was not expecting to have happen. However, he still firmly feels that there are manners in which having the guru come into the Western world as it does and did, that Westerners are not prepared for that.
One of Adi Da's teachers, as you mentioned, was Swami Muktananda. Oh, can you hear me? Yes. And I know, in fact, we even did a whole interview about that from one of Muktananda's devotees who felt, he loved Muktananda. He had a very close relationship. Muktananda purported to be celibate, as I recall. And later on, it was learned that he had a number of unsavory relationships with some of his female disciples. And I wonder, did Adi Da ever comment on that?
Yes, he became aware of that. And his relationship to Baba Muktananda, because Baba Muktananda was one of his gurus, is that he understood that what Baba Muktananda did had something to do with his own spiritual process and practice and his own personal life and choices. And yet, because he wasn't actually there involved and doing that with Baba Muktananda, he did not feel that he was in a position to make comments about it. In other words, to hear something secondhand, third hand, or whatever is very different than being in the direct situation of being able to understand why a guru is doing what the guru is doing. And of course, the details of exactly what happened, he didn't know, and we didn't know if we were actually hearing exactly what had occurred. So there wasn't a lot of gossip or conversation or even kind of a negativity about it. However, years later, I have had a lot of contact with a number of Baba Muktananda devotees, and even some of the swamis that Baba Muktananda, gave the authority to also function as a guru. And they themselves know, why Baba did what he did. And because of the authenticity of Baba's function, and as many, many thousands and thousands and thousands devotees know, that Baba functioned as a true guru. I mean, his ability to awaken and to transmit and give Shaktipat and to help people grow and to heal them and to serve them immensely has never been questioned, even in the midst of what it is that have been scandals about his personal life. So I'm not justifying, again, for anybody that feels that they have been hurt by a guru to make a blanket statement to just trust them and that's okay. I don't feel that way at all. What I do recommend and emphasize, however, is that it is really important to make certain that you have firsthand experience of what it is that you are criticizing, and to understand the nature of the process, and also to understand the guru that you're criticizing, and to inspect the reasoning for why you want to make overly much of things that may have occurred decades ago. I mean, look at Jesus's life. Look at many of Buddha's life. All great realizers have some scandal that has happened around them. Now, that doesn't justify people being hurt in the process if they did feel hurt some way about that. But I do remember Irina Tweedy on one of your interviews that you had with her. Well, she said that if there is a true seeker or an aspirant that is serious about the yoga, whoever they go to, whomever they decide to combine with, and if they make a choice as an adult to participate in the relationship, then they have to take responsibility for understanding that it's not only the objective other that's to be criticized, but you have to realize it's your own karmas that it's useful for some reason that you come in contact with that which has integrity, but also that which may not have integrity. There's always something to learn and to use it as the fuel for the fire of continued growth. And I would
want to add something really quickly. I just want to add that I don't know what happened there, but I know there's a couple comments coming in, and Deborah Katz, for example, is saying that there were multiple allegations of extreme sexual abuse by him, and she's curious if you experienced this. And also, I just want to offer that I think it's good that we're talking about this with karma, because at a certain point, it could also seem like victim blaming or shaming if, for example, somebody did experience sexual or physical abuse from Adida or any other guru, for example.
Yeah. Okay, well, this is, of course, a very delicate issue, and it's personal, but I am able to speak about it. And the reason that I'm able to speak about it clearly, and I'll be honest with you, that my life with Adida was filled with a lot of a process of growth, insight, purification that was not easy around my emotional sexual character. And that was absolutely essential for my growth and freedom and awakening for this to occur. And in very simple terms, one of the reasons why is because at a very young age, I was neurotic and sexually active too young when I shouldn't have been. And it stunted my growth altogether in terms of my ability to function in a balanced and mature way. My discriminative capability was interfered with. I became an addict. I was self-destructive. There's all sorts of things about my character as a manifest human being that was very troubled sexually and emotionally. So Adida worked with me a lot about this. And was I abused in the midst of that? Absolutely not. Was there times and periods in which I felt this is just too difficult? I don't want to go there. This is you're pressing in on trauma. You're pressing in on things that are so delicate and so vulnerable that I don't know if I want to go there. And I was always in a situation in which I could say, stop and walk away. That was my choice, and it was always there to be had. Did I choose to do that? At a certain point, I no longer was intimate with him, but that was after from 30 years later, after being involved in a 30-year process of this very intense examination and participation. So what I did with him in sexual terms and emotionally, it wasn't abstract. It wasn't like sitting on a couch with a psychiatrist, although I have done that. And all forms of therapy in terms of the emotional sexual character and the shadow side. Adida helped to liberate me from this bondage by relating to me and participating with me in this directly. He did this with a number of men and women, although he was never sexually active with men. But he worked with a number of people in this way and in a unique way with each person. And it's Pandora's box, when you get into the emotional sexual dynamics of a character. And he dared to do that. And he dared to, with full knowledge that it would be controversial, he chose to do this because it was necessary, particularly in this day and age, when you see what the explosion is that's happening relative to the sexual revolution, and sexual identity. And both sides of it, the beauty of it and the horror of it. And so in this red yellow realm, it is absolutely essential for the being to be completely awake and aware of every nuance and aspect of your emotional sexual character. And Adida spent decades working with people to help them do that. There's probably I could probably name about 20 men and women that he worked really closely with. Periodically, there would be a number of others that would come in through over the years. There are some that are a very small amount who spun out and spoke loudly on the media and in the news that have had a really big problem with it. And that's okay in the sense that that's mine and that's an acceptable and understandable reaction, because I've had reactions that would be considered, well, you don't feel and do that in relationship to somebody who's trying to help you. But if you have that relationship to authority where you're not able to express what you really feel, walk away. Walk away from authority that tells you cannot express what you feel, think what you think, say what you need to say, and consider with one another and with the authority, how is this helping me? How is this useful? Should I stay here? Is this for me? And if you come to the conclusion that it's not, then walk away. But I would say based on my own experience, is that if you walk away and you don't come to a resolve in your heart where you are no longer playing the victim game, Emmy, what you pointed out, then you yourself perpetuate that lack of healing from actually occurring. So that if you're always targeting another and never able to bring it to a place of resolve in your own being, then it just perpetuates, that pain perpetuates itself. So I think that if anybody has experienced that kind of a trauma or hurt in relationship to not only a guru, but any authority or any other, it's really, really important that you take responsibility for moving beyond it yourself so that you can continue to grow.
So it sounds like you're saying that you personally felt strong enough, you were challenged, but you grew in the process. Although I think that there are some people who are commenting and asking questions about this, and myself included, because I did some looking online as well with Adida, and we don't all know what happened because we weren't there, but there are allegations. And so I think that just some of these questions coming in are just wanting to address, and my understanding is that you're saying that you don't really know what happened to other people.
No, I knew everything that happened to everybody since I came in 1975. Okay. Prior to that, I could not speak because I was not close to him intimately. Um, I can't speak about that. However, I do know people who were with him during that time. Now, if I may not be aware of all of what's online, but I think that there are some things that I could say summarily. Adida never, ever raped anyone. Absolutely, unqualifiedly, never, ever did that. All of those that he was with were willing participants at the point in time in which he may have had some sort of sexual association with them. And the reasons for why he did it was for their own expressed intention to want to understand, to grow, and to awaken. That was the basis upon. So he wasn't casually involved with anyone as if he was just throwing parties and it was a free for all orgy. It wasn't like that at all. And if the person who is characterizing that as a scandal saw it that way, it is more of an expression of their own view of it rather than what it actually was. And I'm not saying that to defend anyone, but I am also saying that it wasn't just Adida in the room. It was a lot of people who were in the room with their own contributions to what the event became. And Adida himself wasn't the orchestrator of all of what happened. Everybody in the room was there bringing whatever the event became. Now, in terms of, I think I remember that there might have been an allegation about Adida having sex with somebody who was underage. I wasn't there at that time. And I can guarantee you that what would underage be? Like I was sexually active with him when I was 18, turning 19. That's pretty young. But younger than that, I absolutely have never seen him violate children in any way whatsoever. So these motions that he's some kind of a sexual abuser of people is really, really not true. I can speak in very detailed terms about what he actually did sexually with a lot of people, including myself. But I feel that that's actually personal, like about how did you have sex? How was he sexually? Did you watch pornography? Were you using, erotic equipment? All sorts of different things like that. Well, I would say that if I'm going to have a conversation with anybody about that, how about you tell me first?
Yeah, I just think that
You
I
know?
think that on one hand, you're very supportive of his teachings, and then on the other hand, you also did leave.
Yeah.
Am I right about that? I have to say I'm a bit confused about the dynamic. So, and I think some other
Okay.
people, yeah,
Yeah.
whatever about that.
So I never left Adi Da as my guru. Okay. I never left Adi Da as my guru. I left the gathering of Adidam at a certain point and a kind of a form of participation. And because it appears as though I left because of the fact that for most of, close to 20 years initially, I was his intimate, like one of the women who was his intimate, lived in the house with him. And not all the time. I had my own space in my own room. I wasn't living in his bedroom. Everybody actually had their own space and such. We weren't just living all as a community in one house, but we had our space and our responsibilities. And I lived my full life as a devotee and with other devotees, but I was one of his intimates. And I helped raise his three children, blood children, and one other daughter, plus a number of other children around him, with a lot of couples and other devotees. But at a certain point in 1992, I didn't leave him. He indicated to me, and I will say it very succinctly, little Buddha, it is time for you to go out into the world. In other words, he gave me the blessing based upon a consideration I had with him about the fact that the intimacy with him changed. This is where I came into my relationship of 32 years now with Nick, long time sustained intimacy, that I went out into the gathering of devotees. So I didn't leave him. He was still my guru. I was still a devotee. And that was the case all the way up until 2006. Okay. So I never left. But I did then end up being further out away from the supposed core, him as the supposed center of his work and center of Adi Dham. So my distance was not ever a negation of him as my guru, and as my heart master, beloved to me in human and religious and spiritually transcendental terms. And that's continued to be so all my life. However, what became really clear to me, particularly towards the end of his life, and also towards the after he passed away, was that what was forming around him lacked authenticity in relationship to how to rightly relate to the guru. And Adida pointed this out to us endlessly. That if you study his word and his teaching, the two things that he criticizes the most is the cult of Narcissus, ego activity as the addiction of cultic behavior, and a wrong relationship to realizers, and irresponsibility, immaturity in human terms, so that you're not actually prepared to make right use of a true spiritual master of any kind. So these matters were consistently addressed by Adida, and yet because he was there in his function and fully being given over, yielding to and participating with whoever came around him, all the way up to the time of his death, what he would always say is, this thing around me is a cult. He himself said, this is not happening rightly around me. You are enclosing me in your mind of what I am supposed to be and using me for your own purposes rather than making right use of me. And this has been an event that he was reflecting to us, that this is what's happened with all great realizers throughout time, that the organizations and people around them, and organizations that continued beyond their lifetime became something other than the actual real process, the esoteric yoga of real instruction and transmission for truly serious aspirants. And he was simply saying this has happened around him too. And such is the nature of egoity and the fierceness of the everyman. Most seekers are not genuinely serious about realization or the reception of transmission. So I never left him as my Siddha guru. However, I did have to process for a long time after his passing away, what was this extraordinary, extremely colorful event all about? I had to really examine it all together and throw it away, without making presumptions of holding on to it as a belief system or from an authority that I felt had done me wrong, or by devotees that I felt betrayed by, or the world's reaction, fierce reaction in relationship to what I did, my family's response to what I did. There's a lot to process, and honestly, that continues. And I don't think that actually ever ends. I think that's the nature of how the ordinary, and I'm not saying ordinary in a derogatory way, just us born without the knowledge of what the real process of true awakening requires and true liberation. And we are constantly involved in a process of growth and outgrowing, learning and letting go, and then accepting, and then seeing maybe that's not it, and then embracing something new, and then constantly involved in an open process that way. So I never left Adida. And also the other thing that was proven that happens in the guru-devotee relationship is that transmission is given, gifts and instruction are given, Shaktipat is given, satori's, experiences. None of those things are actually lost if you continue to grow. the experiences themselves are not what's important. The growth is what is important. The responsibility taken is what is important. So that it's a steady constant of awakening, responsibility in all aspects of your life. And that is, again, a process that's eternal, because there's always something else coming into the field of our experience that's going to test us and require us. Like even this conversation, I didn't know how this conversation would go, but clearly I knew that probably this would be a main focal point, because Adida's controversial.
It's like
I don't think
he's a magnet
yeah,
for the ego, extracting the ego.
yeah, yeah. And as he said, he himself, if you study his words very carefully in his own story about his own life, he said he fully assumed that identity, that he fully assumed the likeness of our forms. And as a young man himself, he said he is an ego. He came as an ego. He said, I'm not making much of this, Bubba Franklin, Master Da, and all the different names. Those were just ways of working and participating with people. And without negating his responsibility, he absolutely assumed responsibility for what he did, and he stayed with it. He stayed with it, even in the midst of all of the blows that he himself personally received. And that's something I could speak to in much, much detail, what he wore in his own person. I mean, when anybody who's a healer, knowing what it is that you have to process in terms of when you relate to people, teachers of any kind know that. In any field, when you really enter into a real relationship with someone who wants to learn an art form or a skill of any kind, human, religious, or spiritual, when you give yourself over so fully, you will become one with the student, or the one that you combine in a really thorough way, as lovers do. So this is the nature of the guru devotee relationship. You are in an in love yoga in which every part of your being is so fully vulnerable in that. And there's going to be times when you say, ouch. And
I
that
think the part
hurt.
that people, and I don't think we have to have the whole conversation on you being in a defensive posture about him at all, because there's a comment in here, can we get to the God part now? And of course, people want
Yeah,
about the
yeah,
guru relationship, but I will just say that there's a comment in here that says, if my spiritual teacher thought sex should be involved, I would run fast for the door. And so I think that some people, because people have a complicated relationship with sexuality, and then you pair it with spirituality, and then you give up some sort of sovereignty in a certain way. I think that people are curious about that, especially when there are those kinds of allegations. So I just want to say thank you, Julie, for at least
yeah.
addressing it. And I definitely, we can move on from here in just a moment as well.
Yes, yes. And Emmy, that the comment, this is important, because this is actually a segue to the God part.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Julie. Thank you.
um, God encompasses God, and of course, God, as with guru, as with a lover, as the beloved, is so broad in how one would feel that being to be, that state of being to be, that condition of being in love, being with God, being who and what is your beloved, who is your master, what is divine. And every single and every aspect of any tradition is always communicating, if it is rightly understood in its essence, it's inclusive of everything and everyone. Every aspect of manifestation is permeated by the spirit. And where is the spirit and the fire most alive in the being? In the emotional sexual character. You cannot dismiss the genitals. There is no taboo about being an emotional sexual character in order to realize spiritual awakening. It must include the whole bodily being, down to the toes. Every part of the being in the mind is permeated and actually literally awakened by the spirit of God, the spirit of the divine. And and because there are many taboos around that have been superimposed over generations, and it's very different in all the different traditions.
And people have been abused through sexuality. That's why it's complicated too. I mean, it's divine,
Yes.
but it can also be
Yes.
horrific for people on how the dynamics play out.
Yes, yes, yes.
Boundaries and respect and love, in my opinion,
Yes.
does not include abuse.
No, no, it doesn't. I completely agree with that. I 100% agree that it does not ever involve abuse, that it should not involve abuse. No, I completely agree with that. And now I agree with that personally. However, there are traditions that don't agree with that. Okay. So for example, in different cultures, there were paradigms where, and particularly in Eastern traditions, there are notions that God or the guru, or even the gods that in Western cultures, you get some of the paradigms from traditions where you've got all of the gods that represent certain aspects of nature, mythology around all of this, the psyche of the mind, where you've got gods that are the fire, gods that are the sword, gods are the ones that crush, and certain aspects of religious and spiritual traditions assume that these gods or these aspects of God are equally as necessary as the mother, the divine mother, the one that nurtures and feeds and loves and comforts. The notion that there must be all of these different forces of being involved in the process within which one awakens and is tested in life, and nature itself is a beast.
It can be.
It can be
Creation and destruction. Yeah.
horribly abusive, so you cannot bar yourself entirely from always seeking to find a situation in which you're never going to be abused, because why? You never know what will befall you. And I'm not suggesting or wishing it upon anyone that they have to experience that abuse at all. It would be wonderful for life to not have blows. But we're not in a position, if we actually look at ourselves, and I'm speaking from my own life, the things that have befallen me with my family and with friends and in nature, with animals, with weather. I've been in horribly abused conditions where I literally felt raped by nature. And I'm saying that literally. The effects of the impact of flood and hurricanes have penetrated my whole being in a literal sense, where it felt like nature and myself and the rooms and the spaces were raped. And I say that word with the force of trying to communicate that the world has this dichotomy within it. And it doesn't justify human beings abusing one another at all, because we are supposed to be exercising a discrimination. So where does God come into all of this dynamic of duality? Who, what, and where is real God and guru? Who would we choose? What would be the real impulse to combine ourselves with a function or an adept skill that someone could grant us, like listening to a virtuoso violinist, where you can hear the tune, you can resonate with it, and you know that if you can duplicate that, and that's being transmitted, the reverberation in the room is being transmitted, and you combine at the same time, and it becomes in sync, and you feel the joy and the ecstasy of that, and it reverberates the whole bodily being. That's the function of guru and God. God not as an abstract other, but the actual function of resonating with what is within and permeating and rotating around the very being that we all manifest as here, not separately, not different than one another. So the God that I have come to understand and the infidelity to is the one that is, as I said at the beginning, actually literally living and breathing us. That is our breath, the God that is the breath of love, that goes through your being and my being and all the beings who are asking questions and in this room together. That is also the permutations of the thoughts, conscious awareness. Consciousness itself is the God, being itself. And we're not separate from that. No one is separate from that. If we were separate from that, we wouldn't even be existing. Like existence itself is God. Existence itself is God. Literally, being is God, not as a separate other. It's actually synchronous with our arising. Literally so. And that's ecstatic. That's the love of it, the beauty of the function of a true guru that can bring you in touch with that and help you see the things that need to be purified, where your attention and energy get bound, just as a psychotherapist or therapist of some kind can help you do that. You see, there's also the function of the guru and the devotees and a culture and an ashram, if it's actually true and real, can help serve that function so that there's a magnification of us all living and being aware and noticing the nature of God, the nature of reality. What
Let
are we
me
actually
ask you
doing here?
a question, Julie, if I may.
Mm,
Uh, I agree with you completely about the divine spark within each of us.
mm,
Totally. It's a conversation we come back to over and over again on
mm,
this channel. But when it comes to gurus, and I've had
mm,
an opportunity to interview many gurus and to interview many disciples from many different traditions,
mm,
and my general impression, especially of the ones who are prominent and well known, who have large communities, my general impression is that a very high percentage of them get caught up in scandals. More,
mm,
well
mm,
over 50%, maybe
mm,
80%, maybe
mm,
90%. And
mm,
it seems to me because they're human, they're all human, and the temptation must be so great when you have that kind of authority and power over people. Um, if we try to count all the well-known gurus who have been, particularly the ones who purport to be celibate. Now, I know Adi Da never claimed that he was celibate. He,
mm.
in that sense, was more open than many, but a large number of gurus, and not just gurus, but pastors and priests as well, uh, have gotten caught up in sexual scandals.
Yes, 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 yes. So that is true. And what you said is true. I agree with what you said, and I'm also aware of that. And then you could also add on to it is that also politicians, mothers and fathers and businessmen and every other kind of person is caught up in sexual scandals. How many people are not caught up in sexual scandals of some form or other, promiscuity, violation, adultery, abuse? So I feel that while if you are in a position of authority, you have even much greater responsibility to ensure that you do not dramatize that lust or lure, for the sake of your own satisfaction. That has nothing to do with being a true guru. Absolutely zero. And any authority, whether it's a mother or a father, is abhorrent. And it shows a lack of maturity to even serve in that function. I often kind of say, where's the training for people to be parents?
Hmm.
The greatest form of abuse occurs from the mother and father to their child, which actually ends up then catapulting. Look at society. It really stems from the root of our childhood in terms, and even with the gurus who may have, not functioned responsibly in their emotional sexual characters and taken advantage of their position. And I agree that there is no purpose in doing that in a fashion that ends up being counterproductive. Uh, One of the things that I pointed to earlier is that because of the people who are in positions of visibility, in whatever aspect of life, whether it be spirituality or anything else, um, I think that again, that applies. Where is the actual integrity in humanity itself to create a different culture with one another that is not enabling and perpetuating these forms of abuse that we lay on one another? And where is our responsibility collectively to ensure that gurus and ashrams and organizations, where is our voice to ensure that these things don't come into be, that they aren't able to be enacted?
You've been very critical of Adi Dam, the organization that he left behind. And we have a question from a viewer named Michelle Hoffman, who asks, given the state of the Order of Adi Dam, how can we build a cooperative community of devotees apart from the order? And I presume that that's an interest of yours.
Yes, very much so. And partly why it is because as I have pointed to in many of our dialogues, that I was intimately aware of the process that Adida himself went through, what his experience was through his lifetime from the point that I came to know of him in 1975 and then lived with him, pretty much off and on throughout all the years until he passed away. I became very, very intimately aware with a very broad spectrum of emotions about what I saw and what I felt he experienced. And because of that, I also know what he communicated very personally and passionately about what was forming around him and the culture that was supposed to come into being as a true culture. And the day that he passed, he said that there wasn't a true culture around him that was actually making right use of him as a guru. And he said that he had worked with a lot of people and given the means and the instruction and even the transmission for this to happen. But he said, so my function is actually over. Like, because he could not make people do, he couldn't be responsible for them. In other words, people have to take on the responsibility of making use of what's been given by the realizers, by great philosophers, by great instructors, by authorities, by mother and father. Like, children and adolescents have to become mature to take on the responsibility for what has been given. And I would say that that's the one thing that he kept saying, is that even though he kept turning it over, because people think he was actually the one that was in charge, that's not actually true. He was dependent upon, because he wasn't just functioning as like a banker or an artist in the world, as walking down the street and just going to the market by himself. He actually had a specific function, which makes it a bit different than just anyone who has the freedom to get in a car and do whatever they want. He actually had assumed the role of functioning within an ashram, and he himself tried to break free of that many, many, many times, because he saw that it wasn't being useful. And he saw that people were abusing him and abusing one another and misusing and not understanding what it was that he was actually trying to communicate and awaken. And so when he passed away, that was his summary conclusion, is that this is not right around me. And I wish that I could live to see the fruits of my labor. I wish that I could see the full manifestation of a right and true response, not only to myself, but also to see that in the world and in relationship to all religious and spiritual traditions and all true creative cultures, that there could be a happiness and a joy of everyone being together and actually create a new life with one another. And he said he didn't see that. He wasn't seeing that. So for the person who's asking about that is that I am being scapegoated myself for speaking out and saying that what is taken form as the organization of Adi Dam, that it lacks integrity. I'm actually walking a tightrope here because I very, very much understand and know what would be required for that. And I know very personally what Adi Da had communicated, as many, many, many devotees do. Many devotees agree with what I say, that what's happening is not it. But the problem lies in the fact, and this is something, again, that Adi Da addressed, occurred in every single tradition, is that there were ego politics at play that took over in an institutionally organized fashion to survive, to have money, to have power, to take authority. Even it may have been good-hearted, thinking that they actually wanted to do the right thing. But in fact, it became an obstruction to the actual esoteric process of what is required to create a true culture, like a real true culture that's about spirit, it's about love, it's about the nuances and subtleties of artistic creativity in relationship to every aspect of life. It's a vulnerable delicacy that cannot be dealt with by a hard hand of rules, and authorities telling away you what you can and can't do, or else you're not allowed access, or you cannot be a part of this club. We're inward turned and we're the ones that know how to do it and you don't, and we're a fundamentalist religion, and if you don't believe what we say, you don't know the truth. You see, the way that Adi Dhamma is presenting itself is it's communicating in Adi Da's words even wrongly. There's a misinterpretation. He called it a revisionism that's occurring in relationship to the manner in which his life was meant to undo. It's actually ending up dramatizing the very thing that he said he was here to undo. Now, people might say, well, that must have meant that he failed and he wasn't right and true. He was phony. Was it his fault? Well, that's the answer. That's the question for everyone to actually seriously consider for real. And not just belong. Not just belong and believe the authorities that took over from a realizer. Don't do that in any tradition. Like, you don't just come along to believe and participate in the form of the daily schedule of rituals and ceremonies and chanting and whatever else, recitations of teaching, believing the Dharma, taking on disciplines. All of that is entirely secondary to the most fundamental process of yoga. They're supportive and necessary, but they're not essential. The essential matter is, at the heart of every being. Literally the heart of every single being will have a unique and real relationship to the divine yoga that is pervading us all. And that is true of anybody that comes into relationship to any form of culture or tradition or transmission. You don't take on the costume and assume that you're going to actually understand the truth of what's being given. You don't just take on the discipline as if that's going to accomplish it. In any great tradition, when you really study it, the essence of it, that's not what it's about. They're useful. They can be useful for ordinary well-being and balance, and definitely make use of all of the tools that life can offer, that of beings that have those kinds of skills. And especially in religion and spirituality, it's really good to be psychologically clear. To get your head straight, aligned with your heart and clear with your navel, and function responsibly. It's really important, very, very important, and not to negate life as if you're in the spiritual realm and you're not part of the world anymore. that duality dynamic has nothing to do with realization. No. That's the beauty of the guru tradition. And if you study it significantly and really understand and feel the transmission of the origins in word and in transmission of all the great traditions, and even the indigenous cultures, and even in nature itself, and true love itself, the what it is, they're all passageways or thresholds to the divine process itself, the divine being and consciousness itself. And so we're all alive in this process together universally. And for us, we've hardly even begun as a collective, to go beyond what general humanity is manifesting these days. It's still pretty dark, really dark. And so we do as a collective, we are as a collective. It really rests on every man as a collective to come together openly, to make right choices, and to help one another, and to say, no, this authority is full of shit. I'm not going to listen to that. And I will love you, I will forgive you, but I'm not going to stop saying when something is not right. It's not serving humanity as a whole. So that's the and I feel that Adida actually gave that to me as a function, and I could go into detail around how that process of awareness or discrimination, of fidelity came into being. It's
just to dovetail on what you're saying, I just want to also mention we've got about 25 minutes left for the live stream. And dovetailing with where you're going, Julie, there's a couple questions from somebody's YouTube name, It Just Happens, and I'll go ahead, throw on my sunglasses here. In solidarity with Julie, what is your realization and or practice, and how do the teachings of Adida work in daily life for you?
Yeah. I am awake, which means that I am consciously participating in my whole body, the whole bodily being, like every aspect of my being, participates consciously and conducts, meaning that I breathe and I feel viscerally, through all my senses, through taste and touch and smell, and particularly touch, and not just physical touch, but tangible touch, into the field of existence, like into the field of this room that I'm sitting in, and feel the energy of the continuum of the energy field in which I live. And I'm psychically aware, intuitively aware, phenomenally aware. Experientially, I have often profound mystical phenomena, satoris and awakenings, blisses and samadhis, that correspond not only with what Adida transmits in terms of the specific process with him, but also that correspond with all of the traditions, because all of the traditions represent, and I'm describing my awareness, this is the awakeness and awareness that I live in, of being aware that each and all of us are structured, literally structured. We're a mechanism to be able to be conscious, feeling and breathing participants in the divine awakening process. And like Kundalini, for example, many people are very aware of the Kundalini process in yoga. But then there's also a horizontal process associated with the gross, subtle, and causal beings of the heart. Jeff, we've spoken about this before in our dialogue. And there's many dimensions of awakening. And the more people are studying about this, it's also corresponding with what's being revealed scientifically about the nature of light and energy and consciousness. So the awakening process is something that I'm very, very 24/7 involved in. And this is through study, this is through conversing, this is through meditation, this is through um, listening, both to sound and music and voice, from all sorts of traditions and people speaking. I study all the time, but I also participate in life, with my family, the responsibilities, with Nick's family, my family, with friends here. I live on a cooperative property, with the eco village where we're all serving, this unity of building something together. It's been in 40 years in the making. And Nick and I are participating here in self-sufficiency, no dependency on any kind of other form of electricity or energy. We grow everything that we eat, apart from bulks, basic bulk things. But we also participate. I also completely enjoy in participating in life and social occasions and getting together with devotee friends, non-devotee friends, conversing with people around the globe. In other words, I'm very integrated, with a very, very wide sphere of people globally. But then on the other hand, I also live a kind of perpetual retreat because I'm very, very much focused in this specific yoga of the heart that is constantly happening 24/7 with the transmission of the bright, which is what Adida's process and way is about. And it's the descent, the divine descent, which specifically manifests in a samadhi that completely awakens my feeling awareness of being not simply identified with a gross bodily being or even just a subtle bodily being or even being asleep and unconscious when I sleep. So the form of the yoga with Adida is living synchronously awake in waking, dreaming, and sleeping. So this is the yoga of the bright. And the way that occurs through the transmission that he gives is that he has given the criticism of the ego act as constricting the whole bodily being in relationship to all of life so that you don't let the divine light in. So the yoga daily for me is notice this. Am I constricted as a waking person in the body? Am I withholding emotionally, mentally, physically, in my feeling heart? Am I doing that in sleep? Am I doing that in dreams, in relationship? Or am I surrendered open and yielding? No matter what arises or does not arise. No matter what I experience, I do not experience. That's the yoga of the bright. And that isn't separate from anyone or anything or any tradition or culture. It's universally manifesting as light, divine light and love. That's the yoga. I don't claim realization or seventh stage realization because Adida indicated that for that to be so, certain signs would have to be there in a collective, because there must be a collective to affirm that. And that's why he said that when he passed away that he could not acknowledge an order of seventh stage practitioners, because what we would have to do as a collective body, the signs weren't there that we had handled the business required in order to say this is the new culture. This is the actual culture of the bright, fully manifesting non-cultically. But he initiated that.
There's a question here from a viewer named Bridge Girl, Grrl, who asks, what stage of life do you feel that you are in?
Okay, so the stages of life in the process that I practice, defining, I could say I'm in all the stages. I mean, I'm saying that literally in a very real way. I am manifesting all stages of life simultaneously. And the capability for me to manifest what would be considered a fourth stage. This, of course, this depends upon the people who are listening, understanding the stages of life as Adida has described them. But there's also a lot of ways that all the traditions have described growing, even in the chakras, or in relationship to the different vasanas or the etheric or the subtle or gross body. I mean, there's a lot of ways that you could describe the stages of life, but it's the sensitivity and the ability to take responsibility for levels of existence. So I am awake and aware of all levels of existence simultaneously. But depending upon where my energy and attention goes, that's where the process becomes active. Is energy and attention bound in a limit in that stage? Or is that stage flourishing in its virtues and able to be understood, and then even gone beyond into awakening into the most fundamental reality, which is conscious being itself? Is that how I'm constantly functioning, simply conscious being as an open vessel? Constantly? That would be most perfect realization and the capability for doing that. And Adidas said to me personally that when you awaken to that, that's when the process really begins. When you awaken to the capability to be fully responsibly conscious, conducting that in the seventh stage disposition, that's when there's radical purification and transformation that can begin. And that doesn't occur to the ego as a separate self. The ego is yielded and you're awake in unity as a collective whole. So I don't claim any realization of a specific kind, but I am awake and aware of all the stages of life, very specifically relative to experiences and the errors and the samadhis therein.
And you talked about the need for a community, that there's a point at which we don't function as isolated individuals. We function as members of the human community ultimately, but at least I mean, we have a community here of the New Thinking Aloud audience.
Yes, 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 yes. Wherever I'm going to pair, wherever more than one is gathered, there I am. What that there's it's not two. Like, we are not separate. We're really literally not separate. So the acknowledgement of recognition is required, that in love recognition of the divine condition. And that is the context wherein then we can creatively come together beyond differences and not have differences be a problem, but be a beautiful, beautiful orchestration of making use of all of the elements to create a circumstance in which we can really understand and look at the situation that we're in. Everything dies. Everyone dies. But what continues to live and never dies is what we meditate in and on and be.
We
that culture.
My apologies. I was just going to say we have just under 15 minutes left. And Julie, you've been doing a great job answering so many questions. And I just want to give you a little space here so we're not running out of time at the end. What is it that you would like to share with the audience around the role of the guru, or anything that you want to make sure that people know here today in this community?
Well, I'll be speaking to myself too, which is not non-separate from what I relate to and speak about, is absolutely assume full responsibility for every action that you take, every choice you make. Be certain that you have examined it fully, not through hearsay, but really be serious about your investment in life and not be casual about it. It's a very serious matter, what we're doing here with one another. And the implications and the reverberations of it are very, very important in terms of if what we are doing is actually adding love to life and the reverberations of true love. I mean, true love that's combined with conscious being itself. And if you do have criticisms or questions, be aware of the manner in which you bring them into relationship to other beings. And be fierce if you need to when you see harm being done. Don't allow harm. Do not allow harm. Do not settle for that, ever. I mean, the world is, we need to serve and love one another so profoundly that we outshine the darkness of people who literally are asleep in evil, that will do unconscious, terrible things to one another and to the world, and they have no sense of the collateral damage that has. And if there are gurus like that, walk away. Nothing to do with them. But there are a lot of teachers and gurus and authorities who are genuinely good people. There are a lot of genuinely good people. Find good company. Don't become a believer or a follower. Absolutely don't do that. With something that you cannot wholeheartedly feel that has authenticity and integrity. And be grateful, be grateful to be alive, to be in this extraordinary time where there is an incredible opportunity for a profound awakening, because we're seeing the dark so clearly and been given extraordinary blessings. And I love this process. I love the fervor of it. I love the investigation of it. I love the questions people have, because the questions are even my own mind. So I'm speaking to myself. It's a way to actually be tested, to understand more fully. So there's nothing you should feel afraid to ask, but it's the manner in which you ask. It's your heart and how open it is. Are you willing to be proven wrong? Are you willing to fail? Are you willing to be found out? Are you willing to be naked and vulnerable? But also, are you willing to be strong as necessary and inviolable if there is something that's going to do yourself or other harm? But there's that play. It's an incredible art and dance.
Beautifully put, Julie. It's been a joy to be with you. We have a lot of questions that keep going back to, the sexual issues and the scandals, and maybe we'll bring you back another time. I just feel like at this moment, it doesn't feel right to rehash those things yet again, but just to acknowledge those questions still remain in the minds of several people who have been viewing, and it certainly is a topic that we're going to come back to more times on New Thinking Aloud. In fact, we do have a program coming up, an interview by Deborah Lynn Katz on cults. And the abuse of power. You can't, when you turn your power over to a guru, you can't help but raise the question of abuse. But there is one last question here from a viewer whose YouTube name is Fucko, and it's a broad question, and he asks, what is separation?
That's a big question. And very nuanced and a very important one. So I would have to ask back, to myself again and to anyone, in what way do you sense separation? It's a feeling. matter, or it even can be an act of separation. And if this question is being posed in relationship to what I'm speaking of relative to what Adida teaches, it is the act and assumption of separation that this psychophysical entity and identity is separate from God, separate from divinity, separate from the source condition of light and life. That sense of separation is a lie and an act of egoity. That's what Adida describes as egoity. It's not the ego that needs to be humanly mature as a responsible, independent being, in which this notion that you give your power over to authority, that's not a right relationship to a guru. You don't give power over to a guru or an authority as if it's a separate other that can take control of your life. That's not a right relationship. So that's a separate relationship. In the guru devotee relationship, there is a reciprocation of recognition of the condition of love, and there's no separation. So no separation is love, being in love. Separation is when you don't feel in love, when you are not in love and you're seeking for it. No matter what you're doing, you can be doing the dishes or sweeping the floor or driving the car or showering yourself or, even having been hit by something unexpectedly. And you can still feel the in love condition. But if you're separate from that by your own act, then your relationship to life will be skewed because it's not in reality.
Although then we come here and we perceive separation or can perceive separation.
Yes. Yep. Yep. Yeah. Perception and conception. Clearly, there's all of these objects. And they don't have to be a problem. Like the fact that we're all different and we're all problems, seeming problems, making it a problem or wanting something that we don't have. If there's something more fundamental that actually allows the heart being to rest in a condition in which we're satisfied in love, the true condition in which the heart is rested in that, then all of the things that seem different and separate from us are actually recognized as what they truly are, which is manifestations of light, recognized as a divine emanation or different of perturbation and modification. There's all sorts of language you could apply to it. It's actually tangible, like, there are objects, but when you break it down, and it's actually just coming and going in time. So we're the ones that are aware of that and feeling the differences and the changes and the movements and the shapings and the shiftings of all of the objects and forms. And it seems like we're separate from it, but in fact, if you exercise any form of real inspection and feeling examination and yoga and breath and relationship, you can feel, and many, many people are aware of this, we're actually not separate. I've got two hands here, and if I put them together, I can feel the energy connectedness. They seem to be separate in space, but in actual fact, there's the energy.
And your hand just raised there, so.
Bye-bye.
Oh, okay. It's time for my special effect.
Oh my gosh, definitely.
Let's see. Is it going to happen? Oh, or did I turn it off? I guess
You might have just, you want to check it?
Yeah. Hold on. I'm gonna.
While you're doing that, I just want to ask Julie, beautifully put, Julie, about how.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, let's go back to him. Jeff, do it. You might want to do it again. I think.
Okay, one more time.
One more time.
It still doesn't want. Oh,
No,
look at it. Oh, well, that's another long story.
Your thumb came up.
Yeah,
We saw
that
part of
happened.
it.
That happened. I'm just learning how FaceTime and the FaceTime camera can interfere with other things. I was in the middle of an interview a few days ago when the fireworks showed up unexpectedly.
Oh, I see. Was it good
Anyway,
timing?
yeah, well, it was because the guest did the two thumbs up, which supposedly the FaceTime camera recognizes. Right now, for whatever reason, it's doing something different.
Giving the
Uh,
thumbs up.
and it was like the key point that this particular guest wanted to make. And
Great.
then there were fireworks, and I thought, oh, it's psychokinesis, but it
Yeah,
turned out to be artificial intelligence.
there you go.
Anyway, Julie, what a joy to be with you.
Thank you. Thank you. I hope that I know there's a lot more. You know, like this to me, it's a
Yeah.
never ending consideration. Yeah. And the
Well,
questions are all appropriate. Mm.
I'm
We're
very
all
happy that you reached out to us. And I'm very happy that you took the trouble to come all the way from Australia to Albuquerque.
Mm, mm.
And
And yeah, thank you, thank you. And I never expected to be involved in this kind of event. You know, like this is new for me to be in the forum of a live event with question and answers on this scale. I've certainly been in situations of question and answers before, but this is a new field, you know, a new arena, and I can certainly feel the psychic reverberations in it, you know, which are non-different, really. So I welcome it all. Mm.
we are all mirrors of each other.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So thank you everybody for your questions, and it's been a joy getting to know you more. Julie, thank you for everything that you've shared and being so open. And of course, always a pleasure to be with you as well, Jeff, and the great audience as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Emmy. Wonderful to meet you.
To be with you. And for those of you watching or listening, thank you for being with us, because you are the reason that we are here.
Yeah.
yes.